I want to share with you the most convincing evidence I've ever heard for support that what is written about what Jesus said is true. And I say this because I've heard some people give doubt about, well, how do we know that that's what Jesus said? How do we know that this is correct, this is right? Okay, well, that's a fair question, right? So there are two things that we can look at. I'll pull one of them up and read it to you. So let's start with two places where it talks about writing down the things that happened in Jesus' ministry and about his teachings. So in Luke 1, it says, "Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us." So already, this is Luke, and he says that already many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us. So people have already started to write down before Luke narratives of what happened among them. He says, it seemed good, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses, ministers of the word, delivered them to us. So it was passed on to Luke and his generation from those who were eyewitnesses of the events. So they're the second generation, Luke is, writing this down. Verse 3, "It seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things." Perfect means complete. Not without imperfection. It means complete. So having had complete understanding of all things from the very first, to write to you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus. So this is one place. So we already know by this that even before the gospel according to Luke, there were narratives that were written down by others who were eyewitnesses of what happened. Let's go ahead and look at the other place, which is at the end of John. This is one of my favorite passages on this issue. He says, he's talking about Peter and John is, right? And he says, "This is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true." He's talking about himself. "And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written." Amen. That's how the gospel according to John ends, saying that this may seem like a lot, but in the end, if we were to write down everything that Jesus did, the books would be more than what the world could hold. The whole earth could not hold the number of books that could be written about all the things that Jesus did. That's how he ends his gospel account. All right, so now, that's not the convincing evidence. Okay, all I'm saying is that here there were people already writing down the narratives of what Jesus did and said, who were personal eyewitnesses of what happened. And then also the second generation were also trying to do this in even a more orderly manner, like Luke, for certain individuals like Theophilus. And the book of Acts also is addressed to Theophilus as a continuation of what happened. But that's not the convincing evidence. The convincing evidence is that you have 11 apostles plus others who were eyewitnesses, who were martyred. They were killed for what they were saying. Now imagine one of the disciples ready to be murdered, and if it were a lie, if it were not true, what they were saying, at that moment they would recant. At that moment they would confess that it was a lie in order to save their lives. Who would die for a lie? That's the most convincing evidence that I've ever heard, is that the apostles knew what they saw, and they were telling the truth, and they went to their death on that truth. And now we have people today, 2,000 years later, who are pretentious enough to say, well, how do we know? How do we know? Well, one of them didn't die from martyrdom. That was John. So there were 10, plus others who followed him in his ministry who also were martyred. Stephen, for example, was the first martyr for the faith. And they went to their death on the truth of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. May the Lord bless you as you seek him and are convinced in him thoroughly with all your heart.